The night has come, it's cold and losing my control. Your light is gone, and lonely darkness fill my soul. I wish that you could save me from my isolation. It's way too complicated. Let's stop this conversation. Let's stop this conversation. We got no relation.
Good evening, and if you're just tuning in, you're listening live to UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. You can listen to us on 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and in Mississippi, and 107.7 FM out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin, and we started right on time tonight, guys. Usually we're a few minutes, but we started right on time. I know you guys will be filing in shortly. A little bit about myself, if you've never met me before. I'm a Canadian psychic medium, a crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher, and mentor. I'm also a registered nurse, working on animal communication. I'm also extremely well versed in near-death experiences, having had one as a toddler myself, and I'd studied them professionally and personally for over 40 years. I'm also extremely well versed in the paranormal. I always say I didn't go looking for it, it found me. And we shared our story on the Travel Channel's Paranormal Survivor. It's season 4, episode 9. It tells a little bit of our story in the previous home we lived in, which was extremely haunted. And if you do look for it, you can find it usually on YouTube, Netflix, all over the place. You're going to see a familiar face on there. I did not know her at the time, but our own Michelle DeRoche, who is our station manager, as well as she has 2 shows here on the network, The Outer Realm on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, as well as Beyond the Outer Realm on Tuesday afternoons. And she is in there. I knew you guys would start piling in there. Hi, Vet Girl. Anyways, I'm glad that you guys are here. Now, if you guys want to, you can watch us on TV. The network does have its own TV channel. You have to go to Roku. You're going to go to the channel store and type into the search bar UFO space P as in paranormal. And there's a drop down list, and you're looking for about the 3rd or 4th one down. And it'll say UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. And that's how you can watch us. I do want to thank Carnation, the brand Carnation, because they sponsor all the shows here on Mondays, including the Angel Rock. So that brand is out. I believe they sell it throughout the world. So if you happen to see Carnation, please pick up one of their fantastic products, because they're responsible for our programming here on Monday evenings. And I thank them most sincerely for sponsoring as well the Angel Rock. Also, if you guys want to join the conversation, I always say if you can't see us, you can't join the conversation. Now, I do know 80% of our audience is audio only. This network does broadcast to every country in the world. It's been around for 25 plus years. We do have multiple shows streaming daily live 7 days a week. And when we're not streaming, the archive server kicks in. So quickly, I'm going to rattle off where you can join the conversation if you are listening and you're thinking, why can't I join in the conversation? This show, The Angel Rock, as well as the second show I do with my very dear friend who is also a host on the network. Her name's Carrie Lynn Shellhorn. She does have her own show here on Fridays called Spirit Switchboard, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also do a show together on Thursdays here, 7 p.m. Eastern, called Beneath the Hollow Moon. We always have new shows coming too, just so you guys know. It's not all UFO and paranormal. We do have something for everybody here. So quickly, if you want to join in the conversation, you can watch on under my name, Lorilei Potvin, on Facebook on my profile, as well as on LinkedIn, on my YouTube channel, which is The Angel Rock with Lorilei Potvin. We are streaming on Instagram under the Angel Rock, as well for the network UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. On Facebook, also on our main YouTube channel by the same name. We're also streaming on Twitch by the same name. And we're streaming, lastly, on the owner of the network, Joe Montaldo's Rumble. So we have to give Joe a huge shout out. He's responsible for creating this great network, and we're very, very grateful for him. I'm checking my list, you guys. I'm checking my list here. I want to make sure I don't forget anything. I think I remembered almost everything. So I see you, Z Sun Dragon. I'm glad you're popping in here. I'll get your comments in just a sec. Now I gotta wear my glasses here so I can see what the heck I'm doing. So give me 1 sec. Gotta switch to all my pages here, guys. Sorry, I don't have enough devices, and I'm joking about that. Guest bios here. Oh, you don't want to help me out here, do you? Well, good thing I got you up on another page. Hang on, guys. So our guest tonight is Nigel Watson, and he's researched and investigated historical and contemporary reports of UFO sightings since the 1970s. He writes a monthly column called Saucers of the Damned about UFOs for Fortean Times, and regularly writes book reviews for the Pelicanist blogspot. That was interesting. Did you hear that, Nigel?
Yeah.
Did that come from your end?
No.
I get lots of EVPs on my shows. Well, Kev, you're here. Maybe you can mark that for me. What time have we got? We've been, of course, it's not counting down. I know what time it is. I'll have to go back and check. Anyways, back to Nigel's he's got a great bio here. I was starting to say he regularly writes book reviews for the Pelicanist blogspot. He has regularly contributed to Magonia, All About Space, Starburst, Aquila, History Today, Fate, Flying Saucer Review, UFO Brigantia, or probably said that wrong, and I apologize. Northern UFO News, The Unexplained, the Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, and Outer Limits Magazine. He's contributed to the Darklore anthology series and to several books edited by the late Timothy Green Beckley. For the reliability of UFO witness testimony, edited by V.J. Ballester-Olmos and Richard W. Heiden. He contributed a chapter on the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. He has a degree in film and literature from the University of Warwick and a degree in psychology from the Open University. Nigel has worked as a copyright in London and now lives in Plymouth, UK. And we're going to be talking about his new book called Portraits of Alien Encounters, Revisited High Strangeness, British UFO Cases. Welcome, Nigel. I'm so glad you're here. That was a good way to start the show out with a bang. We ended up getting some noise. We'll have to go back. I have a whole file between Carrie Lynn. Yeah, when Carrie Lynn and I do a show together or on the Angel Rock, we get so many strange, unexplained noises, and we do debunk them. We just don't say, "Oh, that's
years ago, when you used to have landlines, sometimes there you get funny clicks, and sometimes you even hear other conversations sometimes. But I suppose it was a bit more spooky if you were talking about UFOs and then hear clicks and things, because you hear so much about, I suppose, governments tapping into phones and that sort of thing. So it does make you feel a bit more.
My phone has. Yeah. I think my phone has. I can usually tell. It doesn't happen very often, but I'll be talking about a particular subject. Now we'll say hi to all you there. I see you there. And all of a sudden you hear some clicks and noises, and it almost sounds like a slight echo. And I've had all kinds of high strangeness. Let's say hi to everybody. We got Vet Girl here, says hello all. Z Sun Dragon says hi Lorilei, hi Nigel. And I always call him as I call him, his muggle name, Kevin. And then we've got Kevin saying, thank you for reading the stories on Beneath the Hollow Moon. And we enjoyed them, Kevin. We were glad you shared them. Carrie Lynn and I asked for stories of high strangeness, and we always read them at the end, second hour at the end of when people send them in. Kevin said he thought that the noise he heard, it sounded like a breath.
Okay.
Well, the good thing is there's always So right away after the show, you can watch on my YouTube or the network's YouTube. And then the owner of the network, Joe, it takes him, because we've got so many hosts on the network, it's usually about within a week, he'll upload it, and then it's on every single place that carries podcasts or talk radio. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the most obscure app to the biggest apps out there. So there'll be a replay. So we'll have to go back and have a listen.
Yeah, find out.
Mm-hmm. So we have Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. I love this lady. She's on our network too. This is Carol Ann Ayadarola, and her show is before ours on Thursdays with Ethereal Encounters Unveiled at 5 p.m. Eastern. So welcome, Carol Ann. And we have our Heidi Gall says, hello, Lorilei and Nigel. Much love from Boulder, Colorado. And everybody's saying hi to one another. Hang on, let me scroll through. I love that my chat. They're always so kind to new people here, including they chat to one another. We'll pop in. No, we're good on Instagram. Oh, thank you, Carol Ann. Right back at you. So when we were talking about Gavin, because I love Gavin, he sends me the most incredible authors. And when he sent me your book, I went, oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk about this. So I always like to start at the beginning. So how did you get into, you do a lot of writing and things like that about UFOs. What got you into the field?
I got into it really with the Apollo space missions, and space exploration intrigued me. And then after the moon landings, I discovered books on astronomy and UFOs, and I kind of enjoyed reading the stories of UFOs. Some of them were quite sort of outrageous ones, like George Adamski, who said he met a humanoid alien who gave him messages for humanity. And he even claimed to have had a flight in a flying saucer and met sort of flying saucer people in everyday life. And there were quite a lot of these stories in the 1950s, and these people were labeled contactees, and not a lot of people took them very seriously. So those stories intrigued me, but I also read the more sensible books, like Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Kehoe, and he was more into the idea that extraterrestrial vehicles were visiting our planet, and he wanted the government to sort of tell the public what they knew about it, because he always felt there were government secrets. But he didn't really believe in all these humanoid aliens and the contactee stories, and he preferred flying saucers to be, solid craft in our own atmosphere. But in a way, if you take it to its logical extension, why would they just fly about in the sky? Surely would want to land, and surely there'd be something inside these craft. Surely not all of them will be unaliened, as you might say, rather than unmanned. But so there was that sort of spread between the sort of scientists, ufologists, and the sort of cultist type ufologists and believers. And in a way, there was quite a lot of separation there until something like by the end of the 1960s. I think what changed a lot of things was the Betty and Barney Hill case.
I knew you were going to say that. Yep. Go ahead. Yep, continue.
And that was the first well-known abduction case. There might have been other abduction cases in South America, but they weren't really known very well elsewhere in the world. Somebody called Walter Webb, who was a member of NICAP, the civilian UFO group headed by Donald Kehoe. He'd collected stories from South America, so he was kind of aware of South American sort of abduction cases, but these weren't really widely publicized, and so Walter Webb was one of the first to look at examine the Betty and Barney Hill case, but he wasn't. Although he wrote down their story, they felt it was a bit too fantastic to promote in NICAP. It wasn't until John Fuller wrote Interrupted Journey, which tells of how they had hypnotic regression sessions, which revealed that they'd had this missing time when they'd been on a trip to Canada and they'd seen a UFO, and they'd even seen a UFO near the ground with sort of figures inside the windows of a craft. And it was only afterwards I realised that I'd obviously 2 hours of missing time. And then because Barney had a lot of sort of stress and health problems, it was referred to hypnotic regression. So it's more in terms of therapy that the missing time and the story of abduction came about. And also Betty Hill was hypnotically regressed, and she kind of confirmed.
Drew the maps.
Yeah, and she had a start. She, in a way, Barney was treated more like a lab animal, whereas Betty had more of a conversation with the aliens. She was shown a book and she wanted to take the book away, but they wouldn't let her take it. And she also saw the famous star map, which she thought were like space trade routes. And later, an amateur astronomer then sort of tried to locate Betty's star map with actual, stars in the star catalogues, and she found that it seemed to indicate that the aliens come from Zeta Reticuli, and in a way that point of origin is quite famous because a lot of other contactees have also repeated that star system as a place where the aliens might come from, but some people have argued that why would really advanced aliens have a map on the wall like an ode, like Francis Drake or Christopher Columbus, and that like in our own cars we no longer use maps. Well, I do, but nobody else wants to. But we have GPS and things on our phones. So in a way, I think Jacques Vallée in particular pointed out this craft seemed to be using old-fashioned technology. And I think if you look at reports by the likes of Betty Hill and even George Adamski and the contactees, if you read about their descriptions, all the UFOs tend to be like UFOs out of B-movies and science fiction films of that period. They have levers and dials. They might have a TV screen, but generally they sound very much like the kind of craft you'd expect to encounter by watching films of that period. And even the way Betty and Barney Hill was abducted was in terms of them being sort of dragged on board. Like Barney had scuff marks on his shoes as kind of evidence that he'd been dragged on board this landed flight saucer. And so that was very different from the types of alien abductions we got later on, where people said have been sort of levitated out of their bed at night and levitated through solid walls or doors or windows and then find themselves inside a craft. So
how about you though? Have you ever had an experience?
Well, when I was quite young, I used to go to work early in the morning. I used to take my bike out the shed at the bottom of the garden, and I did see a light go over the head. And I thought it seemed rather strange because I'd never seen a light like that and never did afterwards. I kind of rationalized it as being a satellite or something, but I'm not sure really what it was. And I think when I started investigating UFO cases, a lot of people said they saw lights in the sky and nothing really solid. And those are the worst cases to investigate, really, because you need to check flight paths and astronomical charts. And, and even then, when you've checked everything, it could be, a weather balloon or just, it could, there's so many different things, natural, like natural phenomenon that can cause these things. And I suppose in a way, it's easy for human witnesses to misperceive things. Like only a few weeks ago, I was looking at the moon. I think it was in daytime, and clouds were moving really fast over it. So in a way, you could imagine if you didn't see it before the clouds came, you could imagine it was something solid moving at speed, when it was really the clouds that were moving at speed. And I think, I've seen other things in the sky, and I've kind of, rationalized them as perhaps being, things like aircraft lights and that sort of thing. And that's another thing. Only recently I was driving near an airport, and aircraft do seem to kind of hover over the airfield before they land. And it depends on where you're positioned as well. And aircraft, have all these landing lights and everything on them, but in bad weather, you might only see one or two of them and not hear the aircraft sound. So I think that's the thing. There's a lot of clutter in the sky that can explain things that people might think are UFOs. And another factor is, years ago, I went to Warminster, which is a kind of famous hotspot in Britain during the 1960s. They're just about to celebrate 60 years of that place, and I was riding in a car, and we saw something like a flying saucer in the distance. So the driver just stopped in the middle of a road, slammed his brakes, and then some other people stopped. And it did look like something out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It had lights, it was huge. And it was hovering fields, and I thought, and I was, like I've shown before, I was a bit skeptical of what these things are, but eventually we started hearing the sound of engines. And it was a sort of a blimp, advertising blimp of some sort. It was because if it had kept away from us, I'd have stopped being a real believer, And I suppose that it could have caused an accident as well, but that's beside the point. I think another factor, though, is before we heard the engine sounds and everything, you do get that feeling of awe, that there's something fantastic out there, and makes you feel like a small part of beyond our own realm, really. And there is that thing about seeing something unusual that does make you, there's a certain power there, isn't there? It's like if you go to a cathedral or a certain place with a history, I suppose haunted houses are the same. Even if you don't experience anything, you just get a feeling that it's somewhere different to a normal reality. And well, I suppose also with UFO witnesses that have had really close encounters, have experienced what Jenny Randall's called the Oz factor, where everything goes quiet, there's no sound of birds or traffic, and you kind of enter a different state of consciousness. And so I think even if it's something quite ordinary, it can perhaps inspire awe in somebody and perhaps trigger their interest in the subject. Or Because
Well, there's the phenomena, not to interrupt, but there's the phenomena with Mike Cleland. Hi, Julia Evans. Julia Evans is over in the UK. So Nigel's up late too, and so is Julia. It's now almost 11:30 over there. So I appreciate both of you guys being up so late. Hi, Kirby's 100. But okay, so Mike Cleland, I don't know if you've heard of his work. He has really written books about people that really either want to have a UFO encounter or an abduction, and then they all see the owls. Did you run into people like that in stories, like over in the UK?
Yes, in my book, I mentioned 2 or 3 people who have had communications with aliens in a state of meditation and yoga and contemplation. There's a lady in my book who had what you might call automatic writing. She became aware of these alien messages that were being passed through her. And she wrote about them being linked with Atlantis and that they come from our future, millions ahead of our own time. And she'd also seen a UFO years before. And then she also, when visiting France, had seen this really strange man. He was a lot taller than everybody else. He looked like a normal human, but he seemed to walk differently, and he had sort of boots and clothing that was inappropriate to the summertime in France. And she thought she might have had. He seemed to be like one of these Nordic aliens with blonde hair and blue eyes, which are quite commonly seen from George Adamski onwards. But she had a lot of these intriguing messages, but most of her messages were kind of what do you call it, from aliens that were of a good influence, that were there to guide humanity. So she didn't feel threatened by them. Whereas another person I interview in the book, Norman Harrison, he had quite a lot of contacts that he got through meditation, and he felt there was a battle going on between the good and the bad aliens, and we were kind of like piggy in the middle, really. And so he was quite stressed by the bad aliens, but he also felt he was being protected by his guardian angel aliens as well. And it was a kind of battle going on where he felt the aliens were pushing us to destruction on one hand, and that our own science and technology was also a bad factor, that we should think more about our planet and what we're doing in terms of how we use science and technology. And I suppose he was in a quite depressed state of mind, but he felt that the good aliens were helping him, pull himself out of this rut. But
it's quite common. It's quite common in this field. I can tell you from the clients that I've worked with. I can tell you I've had, I don't know if it's an alien abduction, but I definitely have missing time and woke up kilometers away from just blinking my eyes. Of Julie Jean Bassett is here one night in the November full moon. And I've told the story a few times on this show. She sent me a picture. She's an incredible animal communicator and shamanic practitioner. And she's become a friend. She's been on the show numerous times. So she sent me a photo from the moon in November 2024. And she said, I'm not sure what's in this picture. Have you seen this before? And I looked at it, I go, that's interesting. And I showed it to my partner. His name is Dal. And he goes, oh, that's a lens flare. I said, no, usually with iPhones, it's white. So I said to Julie, you maybe the best thing to do is not always just get a picture, but if you can, film it. So I said, I'm going to go do the same. And she's in the United States and I'm in Canada. So I went out, and as soon as I started to film, I go, I go, Del was right. It is a lens flare. It was green. But all of a sudden, and I'm voice messaging her and I'm going, holy crap, you're not going to believe what I'm seeing. Hang on. And I end the message and I start filming it. Now, I never call it like an alien ship or UFO. it was an anomaly. And what it was the moon was here, I'll face this way, here, and off to, say, if it was a clock between 9 and 10 o'clock, there was this little red light, and it was not a flight pattern, and it was not a bug because it was pretty far away. It was no sound. It was all over the place. It was, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm telling you. So I sent it to her, and she said, I can't quite see what you're saying, or see what you're saying. And so I blew it up for her a bit, and I said, okay, go to this part in the video. It wasn't that long. And she said, holy cow, like that happens here all the time. Like, I don't know if I wouldn't call them UFOs. All I do is document them. They're anomalies. And I've had so many of them because I was reading up on some of the stories from your books, including, so Joe Montaldo is very much into, his show is UFO Undercover. He's the one that owns this network and started it. He's been on Ancient Aliens quite a bit. He has a lot of ufology people on. And I was reading some of this stuff. I'm going to ask you about some of these stories because they are fascinating, what you wrote in your book, for like what people reported to you. And Joe has a theory that he's been doing this study on his website. It's not involved, it's just a few questions. And the theory is that red hair, green eyes, and Rh negative blood did not exist before 70,000 years ago in the human genetic DNA profile. So where did it come from? So he's interested in people who have had either reports of seeing a lot of UFOs or reports of an abduction, if they have these attributes. Now, interestingly enough, I don't have them, and my mother doesn't believe in any of this stuff, but my mother has all three: red hair, green eyes, and Rh negative blood. And I've had a lot of weird, strange things. I can't say it's alien, but the reason why I wanted to ask you, because some of the stories I was looking at, it almost sounded like there were some families. Like, did you find that, like different versions of families that were having these experiences?
Yeah, I think
I'm looking right now. Yeah, go ahead.
There was Paula Green. I think she said
yes.
Her family seems to have had different encounters and sightings. There's another one, Stefan Lebetsky, and he's also said his family have had encounters.
That's the one I read. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to just read a little. It sounds like it came from your book. Please forgive me if it's not word for word. It came from the website Mystic Living Today. And so, Stefan, I just lost it. It says, Stefan, is it Lebets? How did you say his last name? I would have said Lubacek, but that's not what you said.
Lubacek, yeah.
Is that how you say it, or is it different?
Yeah.
It's an unusual spelling, but you wrote, or it was written here, Stefan Lubacek has had a lifetime of strange experiences and alien encounters, which seem to run in his family. Unlike many abductees who are spiritually uplifted by their alien contacts, Stefan's experiences are deeply troubling to him. And it went back as far, going through this article, it started, it sounds like in 1970 when he was 11 years old.
Yeah. So that was something like a period of time, but most of his encounters have happened in the sort of 70s and 80s.
Right.
That's when I was mainly investigating them. But he came to me later on to speak about his experiences. And it's interesting that from when he was only 11, I think he felt he'd been abducted.
They look like Pink Panthers.
Yeah. And
that's what he said the aliens look like. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
And he said his sister had also seen lights about the same time as when he'd been abducted, but he only found that out later. So, he had all sorts of different experiences, and the sort of range into the paranormal as well. And that's another interesting thing. When I first started investigating high strangeness cases, people didn't just see a UFO or an alien or something. They often reported lots of other things, paranormal events. And we didn't always relate them to the UFO experience, but often there's that connection between people having childhood encounters, seeing lights and things like that they might even forget about, and then remember later when they've seen a UFO, and then it sort of triggers their memory back to when when they're a child. And also with Paula Green, she mentions talking to a bird that perched itself on a wall outside her home, and she kind of spoke to this sort of bird, and then I think later on she saw what she thought was like a pig or something outside her window, and she had all sorts of different experiences, and had a bit of a UFO encounter, I think when she was a young teenager, and saw something with like propellers in the sort of local woods, and it beamed light at them. But
Judy Woods, right? Because I see her story. Would you mind me sharing with people? Because this seems like it might be. Okay, so it says Paula Green. Paula Green also talks about her experiences that began when she was 6 years old in 1977. And as I was reading this, because I was doing a little research, and I thought, why were these always from the 70s? But you answered that question. You said that's when you did the majority of your research. So she said her first one, she was 6 years old in 1977. Her first UFO encounter, and you guys, these stories are from Nigel's books. So and they're not stories. You've interviewed these people. I want to be clear about that. Her first UFO encountered in October 1983 when she was 12 years old, as she was walking through Judy Woods in Bradford, it sounds like, in the UK, or England, I would say, right? That would be where it was, England?
It is near Bradford, yeah.
Okay, and she said with a friend, the object was a strange 30 feet or 9-meter high structure with a boomerang-like arm that slowly rotated in a clockwise direction. She said that when the object bathed them in a pale blue light, everything went in slow motion, like it was a horror movie. I remember turning to my friend and saying, effing, I can't say the whole word, run. Not that I can't, I just don't on air say that word. I had to drag her as she was so terrified and awed. On getting home, she was shocked because she was very late and she had lost 4 hours of time. And then I'll just add the little part after this because it continued for her. It says, over 10 years ago, Paula had an abduction experience where she found herself in a molded round room. She said, I sat in a chair, eyes focused on a screen. People were sitting near me. The totally glass screen was a bit bigger than an iPad. It showed scenery with a 3D effect. It showed landscapes with rivers, birds and flowers in glowing, vivid colors. It was a flow of pictures, but no people were in them. And she said, they made me feel very happy and elated. Then there was devastation. Did she go further into that, Nigel? Like what had caused from extreme, elation to devastation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much like Norman Harrison's experience I mentioned earlier. And, it's like paradise at one time on the screen, and then it's like apocalypse and destruction. And that seems like a common theme in a lot of these abduction cases. People are often shown like a film screening of humanity and destruction or paradise. And also, I think with Paula, she didn't like to think of them as abductions in the classic sense. She just felt like she blacked out and found herself in these places. She didn't, see an alien or a UFO or anything. She just found herself in these places, and so she didn't like sort of pinning a label on what was causing these things. But if you read the book, she did have lots of other different and very odd things happen to her. But speaking to her, she was very down to earth and very believable person.
Right.
And I think that's the case with all of the people I've spoken to.
There's one I'm dying to ask you about. Just hang on. I'm just going to read Kevin's story, a thing here. He said, so like my stories are actually experiences, because Kevin has, like I said, just shared some, and he has in the past many times on this show with me or privately, but also on my Thursday night show. We read 2 of his stories he shared with us. And he said, like my stories are actually experiences that I wrote out there. So true stories, basically. And he said, loving Nigel's story, Lore is reading us. Wait till you hear this one, you guys. This like, and we got into Stefan, was it Lubacek? I think it was his last. Anyways, he was just describing, from what I could read here, they weren't pink panthers in the sense of like a pink panther, like what we would see a regular animal. He was referring to the cartoon, the Pink Panther, but without the tails, is what he was reporting. But this one just got me. I have to read this one if you're okay, because it was like, holy cow. Okay. On a wider scale, Nigel looks at the Liverpool leprechaun scare that erupted in July 1964, which mainly involved gangs of children. These quote-unquote leprechauns were described as little green men in white hats throwing stones and tiny clods of earth at one another. Similar child-oriented scares of this type are included in your book, along with close encounters reported by children. What's with the leprechauns? All I could think of was Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, like Willy Wonka in the
So I like the Liverpool leprechaun panic because it occurred in the early 60s, and it
was kids, so it wasn't like they were taking extracurricular substances to create this, right?
And it's interesting because Liverpool is not far from Ireland, and there's a lot of people moved to Liverpool from Ireland, and there's a lot of Catholics, and I think a lot of the kind of folklore also got transmitted to Liverpool to bring about these leprechauns. But there is one newspaper story that says that somebody saw a UFO as well as a leprechaun. So the newspaper was tongue-in-cheek saying, oh, the UFOs have brought the leprechauns to Liverpool. But that didn't get a lot of publicity. Most of the publicity was the kind of riotous behavior of the children. And I think, a lot of the children were just being a bit riotous and boisterous. And I think it transferred from some parks in Liverpool then to nearby Kirkby, and I think children were messing about in a local church and a cemetery, and I think that's the thing with these childhood panics. Often they occur in schools, where people think.
Wasn't it in Zimbabwe or Nigeria, that famous UFO that landed? All the kids saw it.
And also in Broadhaven in Wales, there's famous case of children who during the playtime saw a sort of UFO on the ground with alien figures nearby. And it was at a time when a lot of other people were seeing silver-suited aliens in the area. So schools seem to be a sort of breeding ground for these sort of things. And there's another case I mentioned from Hull where a child was in the playground and he saw a UFO land on this flat school roof. And he saw 3 aliens in golden suits, but they didn't seem to with helmets, and we had like tubing connecting them to the UFO, and they didn't have any hands, and they kind of walked about on the roof and then returned to the craft and flew away. And it frightened the boy, but no other children in the playground saw it, but it did leave a lasting impression on him. And in the book, I also mentioned a few other school cases where children had seen something, fly over their school, and sometimes, like the leprechaun panic, it seems like a rumor's just gone around, and it's hard to pin down how these things start, and then it's a bit like the classic UFO flaps. To start off with an intriguing story that some people might find, at least plausible, and then you get all sorts of extraordinary stories, and then you get explanations coming out. Like with the leprechauns, there's a few explanations. One person said he was responsible because he was wearing Wellington boots and a funny hat, and is short in stature. So he said the children had seen him.
But he wasn't green, right? He wasn't green.
Yeah, that way green. And also Penn Dodd, who was a famous comedian, he said he used to have what he called the Diddy Men, and he said he'd done a feature on TV about Diddy Men, and he thought that was an inspiration. But I'm not sure, the explanations for it seem as wild as the actual cases themselves. But what interested me most of all is like
I wonder
the children are open to all sorts of strange things, and it's interesting the way it was these little beings were interpreted as leprechauns, whereas other times would be, pixies or little green men. And I think the newspaper jokes about little green men. But the thing is, it's how these stories are shaped. Like the UFO mythology at large gives people a kind of palette to work from. Like now, say in alien abductions, a lot of people say they've seen spindly aliens with large heads and almond eyes, and that was a common feature. But now you don't even seem to get many abduction cases, not like the ones you used to get.
Well, I got to tell you this one story. So like I said, in the field that I'm in, I work with a lot of people. Like when I'm in meditation, I know I connect with the other side, very, very deeply connected with the Lyrian race myself, or who I believe is. And one of the things I have always received, and I just call it collectively spirit, and they always say that Earth and human beings, not so much Earth, but human beings are a very young race. And then depending on who you're talking to, that they're the off-worlders, if you were, are not supposed to interfere with us, right? The prime directive, if you believe in that, if you believe there is a galactic federation. I don't know. I'm always just open to the possibility. Anyways, this one client I had came to me because she said she was having these visions. So we started talking about it. And interestingly enough, because I guess it's the nurse in me, I do a bit of a history with someone, what's going on. I always tell them, don't tell me everything, just a little bit less is more, but sort of why are you coming to see me? And she, like I said, she'd had a near-death experience. And I've also noticed with studying them for over 40 years, a lot of people, including children, seem to have almost gifts or special, if you want to call them powers, whatever you do, unlocked that they didn't have before the experience. So this lady, what she was calling visions, and we talked about it and she agreed it was more like a dream. So when she would fall asleep, she would have these very, very, very vivid experiences of being on a ship, abducted. But the interesting thing about this, and this is quite a few years ago, I've never forgotten this, she started to describe what was happening. And as she hadn't even told me, but it was like she was capable of telepathy without recognizing it. Like when she was describing the three different off-world extraterrestrials that were there, I could see them in my mind before she even explained them. Because as she started to explain, I'm already on the internet looking for images going, did he look like this? And she's going, yes. And as she started to explain things, she feels, and again, she called it a vision. She wasn't saying it was real, but she said it was almost like as a woman being on a gynecological table, maybe getting ready to have an exam.
Wow.
And she felt that she had given birth to a baby up there. But I already could see all this before she told me. It was the most strangest, oddest session because I'd never had that experience working with a client before. It was like, there's another noise we just heard. Did you hear that? It was like she was projecting what she was about to tell me into my mind. So I don't know if she was abducted. That's not the first client I've heard from, though, that has told me that they believe, and she called it a vision. She just wanted to know, try to make sense of it. What was going on? What were these, including she felt she was being given information with these visits that they would sort of tell her what was coming. So she almost felt they were predictive. That's why she was calling them visions. So, but my thing was she could project to me what she was about to tell me.
Yeah, because in my book, quite a few other people do mention telepathy. Often in these contact cases, the aliens give information to the person, but not by using words. It's in their mind. And that's a bit like the automatic writing that one of the people did. And
I do automatic writing.
Yeah. And I think another thing is a common factor is that a lot of people in my book have nightmares and dreams and that have a UFO feature to them, and that some people say they can tell the difference between a dream and their other experiences.
Yes.
But some of their experiences are more like hyper realistic, whereas the dreams aren't as strange. They're more like classical dreams. But sometimes a lot of these encounters do seem dreamlike in the sense that the jump from one scene to another. And like sometimes in a dream you see one person, but you identify them as somebody else. And there's that factor in a lot of these encounters where people are almost like in a dreamlike state. And I suppose in a way, some of these cases people think, they are intruding into their dreams or nightmares, as well as causing them to see UFOs. But I think it depends on different people. Some are more what's down to earth and don't want to relate it to dreams and nightmares and things. But I think there's a kind of sliding scale of awareness, really. And I think I've not tried to identify any real answers to, what these experiences are about, because I think there's different factors in every case. We've got some common features, but they're all quite unique in their way as well. They're related to what the people themselves believe. So with people who are a bit depressed and fearful of the future tend to have more depressing and negative UFO encounter experiences. And these are where people see, reptoids and insectoids and can have quite nightmarish abduction experiences where they kind of see people be suffering on board a flying saucer, or and we think the aliens have some sort of nefarious agenda, to sort of populate the world with hybrid alien human babies and that sort of theory.
Oh, I got lots to hang on. I gotta say hi to a few people. We got a few people on Instagram popping in. We got Karen. Hopefully, I'm saying this right. Karen Majid, I think. And then we've got Andrew von Schlapp over on Instagram. I know I seen. Hang on, we got a bunch of people here. Michelle Wilfong popped in. Contessa Martins. Hopefully, I didn't miss anybody. If I did, just say hi again, guys, so I didn't miss you. Well, there's the topic of hybrids as well. And I love what you said, that you don't try to figure it out. You're just sharing, it seems from your book, sharing people's stories. But what I wanted to comment on about the dreams that you're talking about, I can definitely concur. My youngest son passed away very unexpectedly just this past January. And it's been 7 months actually on Friday since he passed away. And about 2 weeks ago, I was in my room dreaming, and he walked out of his bedroom and started talking to me. And I remember in the dream saying to him, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." And it woke myself up, right? But I knew it was a difference between a dream and something I might call a lucid dream, but more profound. Before we had the major paranormal experiences we did in my previous home, I had a dream that happened about 17 years ago. That happened like it was 5 minutes ago. And it was a man, without being too long, sitting up in the front tree in my old house in my front yard. I can tell you exactly what he was wearing, exactly what he looked like, right down to pinstripes in a suit. And he knew my name, and he was asking me, at the time, I've hurt my back, so I can't go back to active nursing, but I'm always creating and crafting and all kinds of stuff. And I was making pet accessories at the time. And he said, "Hello, Lorilei. You know that little business that you have? That's nothing. I can give you wealth. I can give you fame. I can give you anything beyond your wildest dreams. All you have to do is agree to follow me." And it's not very radio friendly what I told him to do. And this is in a dream. This isn't live, like it's like in the middle of the night. And he then kind of laughed at me again because I didn't agree to follow him. And I said, "Who are you?" And again, I don't even know if I believe in demons. I say I'm a retired Catholic. But he said he was a demon, told me his name, told me how to spell it. And again, I told him more emphatically where to go. And then he started laughing at me and he went, "Oh, no, 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 no. Every time you see a crow or a raven, you're going to know who it is." And in the dream, I called on Archangel Michael. I can't even describe the colors. It was like the brilliant, brilliant royal blue, silver, and white flash. I woke up 3 a.m. shaking, crying, and in a sweat, something I never ever do. And indeed, all heck did break loose. But the creepy part, I could never find what this name was I was given, including the spelling, even having been forced to go to church, Catholic school, the whole bit. And then about 5 years after that, I was helping somebody with a paranormal experience, and I was looking something up for them. I found on that same page what I was looking up for this other person, the name I had been given, the exact spelling, the animal form, everything. That was not a regular dream. And I share that just so I for our listeners or people that are watching, it happens, and you know the difference between a dream and that kind of dream. So those, it sounds like those are the kind of dreams that people you were interviewing were having. Would I be right? Like they knew the difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing, though. I do mention the book with theories like sleep paralysis of false memory syndrome and those sort of theories, but I haven't gone into them in that much detail because I think the problem is people come up with these theories and then they kind of use it as a kind of label and explanation for all these types of experiences. And I think in a way that's as bad as being, a total believer as to be a total skeptic. I think there's a middle ground where you've just got. I was
just going to say that. You got to have both. You can't just always say it's this or it's that. Just be open to the experience. If you can, document it. But you also have to use common sense, which I'm finding more nowadays. And no disrespect to anybody, a lot of people don't have that, it seems. It's not always something. It's just, I think it is, right? So I cut you off there. Please continue. Mm-hmm.
I think it can be a problem with ufologists because if they're pursuing a certain line of inquiry, like they want to prove aliens are visiting us or they're extraterrestrial craft, then we've got that kind of frame of mind. So everything becomes a kind of argument for extraterrestrials. And I suppose in a way, if you've got a skeptical frame of mind, everything's sleep paralysis and false memory syndrome. But I don't think, in a way, that's what you might call confirmation bias. But you're just confirming your own biases. And when I interviewed for people in this book, I didn't really discuss other UFO cases or anything like that. I think after I'd interviewed them, they might ask what my own thoughts were about the subject, but I remain rather neutral.
You were objective, and that's what makes it such a great book.
But in a way, I suppose I don't have. I still think it's a kind of enigma because there's so many elements to the subject, and I think there's that element of explaining misidentified phenomenon in the sky, and then there's other psychological phenomenon associated with close encounters, and the fact there's dreams and other elements to these cases. And I think particularly when I started investigating high strangeness cases, some British investigators said, "Oh, why are you investigating them? They're just products of childhood fantasy or people's dreams." But I think you've got to include all the information because and not to censor out these things, because I think if the people themselves thought these elements were important, I think you should include them. And that's another thing, that ufologists can be self-censoring the material because they pick the cases they think are the best, but then over time new theories come along, and then they realise they've missed out a lot of information, and a lot of it you can't retrieve because time passes and people move on. So I think in a way you've got to be kind of open-minded and perhaps a little bit distanced as well, because otherwise you can get kind of sucked into of these UFO beliefs and things, and I think you can get quite paranoid. I think in particular there's people like John Keel who wrote about UFOs in the early 70s. He wrote the Mothman Prophecies and Operation Trojan Horse, which are sort of brilliant books. But I think Keel got sucked in by what he called silent contactees. I think at one period of time they were telling them there was going to be a terrible apocalyptic event, and he filled his car with supplies and went up to the high ground to live out this apocalypse, and nothing happened. And he kind of noted that the aliens or whatever are tricksters, and that they can play with you and also confirm things that you might believe, and then leave you out in the code, and they can fool you. And there's been numerous times when people have predicted events that never happened, and
but that depends if you believe in, say, like multiple timelines, or to me, I think if we're here and we have free will, I think we do to a sense, right? I've been guilty of saying I didn't have a choice. No, we always have a choice. It's just sometimes we don't want to make that choice. So with that theory, including, I think that everything is energy, and like energy attracts like energy on this planet. So when you were talking about people who maybe were, sounds a little bit, you didn't use these words, but maybe a bit more fear-based, or we're having nightmares and then sort of more negative sounds like experiences, versus people that had a different perspective, maybe a little bit more positive, right? It sort of seems like then they would sort of have more positive experiences. So that totally makes sense to me. We got a couple comments and questions here. I'm going to just pull up, but I want to ask you this one thing. So, because I think it's a good question, because I love Gav always puts a few questions in here. So do you find, after you've written this book and all the people you've talked to, have you changed your mind about maybe what you thought or theories, or have they stayed the same, or how has that been? I'll get to your questions and comments, I promise, guys. Please.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think at the beginning I did think there were like spaceships and extraterrestrials, because it made sense. We were visiting the moon and the astronauts were in spacesuits and doing scientific research. Now, a lot of UFO cases in the 60s and 70s did involve people seeing aliens in spacesuits, carrying out scientific investigations, and even the Betty and Barney Hill case seemed to be a case of the aliens examining Betty and Barney, giving them a sort of medical examination. So it seemed kind of logical that these, aliens from thousands of years and more advanced than us, would be doing the same type of research as we were doing with the moon. But then the writings of John Keel and Jacques Vallée showed that a lot of these cases seem to be quite implausible. The aliens give garbled messages, and the spaceships didn't seem to be like real craft. And they kind of brought in the elements of the paranormal, that people have been seeing these things for centuries, that we interpret in terms of UFOs and aliens, are the kind of things people interpreted as religious visions in the past, or as elements of folklore, that sort of thing. So it seemed that John Keel's writing sort of emphasised the kind of paranormal aspects, and he kind of thought that whatever the intelligence is behind the UFOs and everything exists in a sort of parallel universe with the planet, and that they can kind of come into our dimension. Yeah. He called them ultra terrestrials, but I think in a way, because he was a journalist, I think he was seeking new kinds of labels, really. So in a way, ultra terrestrials was just another name for aliens, and I think that's a kind of problem. You still have the same phenomenon. It would just gets a new title.
Just like we have UAPs now instead of UFOs.
And UFOs were given that term because they were called flying saucers and discs originally. So the name always changes. And in the Second World War, pilots saw lights following their aircraft, and they were called Foo Fighters.
Yep.
And, they were mystery.
One of my favorite bands, by the way. I just gonna say hi. Hang on. We've got D Clove 1 joined us on Instagram. Welcome. And we got a couple questions and comments. Kevin says, I think there are tricksters and good aliens alike, like people. I agree with you, Kevin. What do you feel, Nigel?
Yeah, I think there is very much that element in these reports. In one of the chapters, I mentioned someone who saw a jester. Was it a jester and an angel, and then they merged into one? And people see all sorts of strange things, and you think, are they having the leg pulled, really? Because there's the other instance of the Pink Panther aliens. Like, who would believe you if you said you
that
saw
really
aliens?
Floored me.
Yeah, and also
that floored me.
And also Paula Green mentions a sort of alien she met who was almost like a cardboard cutout who holds her hand and takes her into the sky like Lois Lane in Superman. And so that was almost like people have these experiences that seem so implausible that nobody...
Okay, so I have a theory about that. And then I'm going to get to Sean Ellis's question. And thanks, Sean. I know you shared the show out. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to start. Hang on, Sean. Okay, so I have a theory about this, and I've heard it from many people with work, doing this for years and the line of work that I do, that especially as children or even any experience with something. There's people I know that have had books. I have to get back to her, Christy. She was supposed to be on my show. She's was part of from Gavin, I believe, and she wrote about real life people, angel experiences. But I've also seen it as I believe with connecting with, I believe it's guides, angels, what have you on the other side. Angels don't have wings, but when they appear, when people will report seeing them, and I've worked a lot in palliative care right at the end before people are crossing over or crossing from this planet, wherever you may believe you're going. A lot of people will report seeing angels, but they'll see them with wings. I've also had people tell me about, as children, experiencing what would be an alien or extraterrestrial, but they might look like a really cute cartoony version of something they're familiar with. So my theory is that they're much more evolved than what we are as human beings. Plus, we're trying to wrap our human minds around whatever it may be. I think they have the ability to shapeshift, if you will. So if they have something positive, not all of them, they could be manipulative too, but the majority that I've talked to, people having these experiences, the being has morphed into something that won't scare the living daylights out of the human, basically, so that you know that it's there. You'll be comfortable with it there. Even at the end of life, people will say, oh, do you see that angel there with the wings? And then some people say they'll just see this beautiful light that they'll know is an angel as they're about to leave. Same thing with, I have heard even with extraterrestrials, children experiencing them, again, something cartoony like, because then they're not scared, so that they can actually have that interaction. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion, mentions that the aliens wear masks and that they're tricking us, and they can often say, look humanoid, and then turn into a different shape, into a reptoid or something else entirely. So
as our question, have you, Sean's asking, have you came across anyone being, I think it's, or have you crossed anyone who's seen a reptilian?
Yeah. Well, Paula Green mentions this crocodile-like entity when she was asleep, and she felt this sort of weird crocodile-like thing that was touching her, and she felt it. It just seemed to be some sort of reptilian alien, and it sort of frightened her. And but I don't have that many other reptoid cases in the book, because it was written in the sort of 70s and 80s, and I think a lot of these sort of different things came about more in later years. But there are quite a few instances of angels in my book.
Well, let's talk about that if you don't mind. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, like you say, sometimes these things are seen in terms of what the person hopes or expects to see. And somebody mentioned that a couple saw an entity, and the husband saw an alien, and the wife saw an angel. So often it can be different people's perceptions. And like I said before about religious visions, often religious visions from the past, like Fatima, sound more like alien type encounters today. So I think in a way,
Yes, Kevin.
There's something going on, but
Yes, Kevin.
it's how, I suppose, in a way, our own perceptions and the culture we're in, because, you know, we're more likely to expect to see alien space figures than angels nowadays, just because of the influence of our current society and technology. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing. Often people see UFOs always seem to be one step ahead of our own technology. You know,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
and like now we're getting new apps because they're kind of advanced forms of drones, and so it's another step in technology. And where again, a lot of these U apps are related to people having psychic and telepathic messages.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of read recently that, you know, that these sort of U apps might be employing was it psionic weapons, you know, that are using technology that can play with our minds. And
Yeah, the military has that already. It's called the voice of God. And I
yeah,
know they use it
yeah,
within warfare. It sounds in your own voice within your own head. And
yeah,
it sounds like you would think it was one of your own thoughts. They have that technology.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that there's a British report compiled in the late 1990s, the Condine report.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it dismissed most UFO cases. It was a kind of report for the Ministry of Defence that was mainly used to close down their small UFO department. But even the author of this report felt that there was certain rare plasma phenomenon that could have an adverse effect on people and vehicles. So even in that, it said that this phenomenon could exist, that could cause people to have close encounters, but it's only a few paragraphs, and we don't really explore that area. But
Have
we
you
do.
ever looked into the work of Werner von Braun? Because I have to be careful what I say here because we're on YouTube. So I'll do it as best as I can. And I have a friend by the name of Dan Willis. I used to have him on a lot the first year. And he has actually put out a documentary called Why the Secret Space Program Will Always Remain a Secret, or something to that effect. And he had talked about this. So they all thought that disclosure was going to happen May 6th, I believe it was 2002. So what happened was there was higher ups in the U.S. military, right up to admiral generals, and please forgive me, guys, I'm not from a military family or background, but very high up. And they all swore under oath. All the major news networks were there, and they brought what all the kids these days are calling the receipts, meaning they brought what they were talking about. There was a group of them. Dan was there too. And I'm going to get to Werner von Braun. There's a reason why. Anyways, they all talked about what they had seen or experienced, including Dan had experienced something down, I believe, don't quote me, but it's quite a few years ago, around Antarctica during the Korean War. They witnessed something coming out of the ocean.
All
And
right.
so, yeah, this was all reported. They wanted to bring it before Congress. And so all that happened, though, was at the end of the news broadcast at night. Like, this was the huge networks from around the world all went, some people believe that aliens and UFOs exist, laughing. Dan said at that time there was 57 different types of extraterrestrial species that they had all experienced. Now, he had always talked about this, but he had never had it in a documentary. Back to Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun, if you look him up, he was not necessarily a nice gentleman back from World War II, but he was over here in the United States, and one of the women that testified worked with him. And he apparently basically there's historical documentation. And especially on his deathbed, he named all of the world events that have caused a lot of really awful things like 9/11. He didn't call it 9/11, but he told them it was coming. He said the last one is supposed to be a fake alien invasion. I know a long story to get to what I'm saying to you, but the point is, he said sort of exactly what you did. It will make it look kind of like that movie, if you will, Mars Attacks, and that we're under attack, but it's
Yeah.
not really aliens, it's the technology they have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was that whole thing about people saying that to consolidate people and encourage peace on our planet, that we should have a sort of outside enemy, and if aliens are
Yes.
regarded as as an hostile threat to us, that we might all
Didn't Ronald
cooperate.
Reagan say that? Ronald Reagan back in the day,
Yeah,
wasn't he the one that suggested that?
yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is that even if we had an alien threat, I'm not sure whether we would be that cooperative. We've already got the threat of climate change and
Mm-hmm.
overpopulation and
Mm-hmm.
nuclear arms and those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really work that well universally, So
No.
I think it still have problems, whatever the enemy is, because people are used to having conflict and enemies, really. And so I'm not sure that would help. But I think there is that thing about military technology and perhaps rare events like plasma could affect human perceptions, but I don't think that's the case in my book. It doesn't really explain a lot of UFO cases across the world, really, but it might, in very few examples, be
We have
caused.
a question because I want to ask you. You brought up hybrids. I want to ask you about the crop circles because I know that was a big thing over in the UK. So the question is from Sean Ellis. I got to read it up here, otherwise, I'm going to put my glasses on. So he says, "What is your thoughts on the North and South poles possibly being gate openings to other continents that may have new life forms because we are not allowed to go there?" And if you don't know, that's okay. If you do, or you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
Um, I'm I'm quite sceptical of that, but it is an idea that's been muted in UFO circles
Mhm.
from the beginning. Really, I think there's a Richard Shaver stories that were
Mhm.
promoted by Raymond Palmer about the time Kenneth Arnold had seen his flying saucers. There's these accounts by Richard Shaver of Deros and Teros that he felt lived underneath the surface of the earth and were
Right.
sending uh, beams, projecting beams to human minds to cause us to act in different ways, and they were manipulating us from under the surface of the earth. And there are quite a few theories about the hollow earth and
Mhm.
beings underneath. And then there's all these rumours of military underground bases that
Mhm.
have aliens living in them.
Yep.
So um, I think it's part of a subject, but it's not an area I've really believed that much in because I think uh, it would be very hard for uh, sort of aliens to exist without us noticing them, and that um, how would they be operating UFO craft? Why would they bother flying out and flying all over the world really when they can exist inside the Earth? But I suppose there's lots of practical problems about that. I'm still a bit skeptical about UFOs going into the sea as well, but that seems to be something people talk about a lot as well.
Mhm.
That they've been seen going into the ocean, or
Mhm.
they've got bases in the ocean. But I think generally aliens seem to always live in bases that are always in remote and inaccessible places, and that's just where fairy folk used to live, and the kind of fairy folk in, say, Celtic countries
Mhm.
um, died off with technology and people people inhabiting most areas, so that there's no remote place for the fairies to go to.
We just talked about fairies last Thursday, and there was a video that went viral here in Canada of a gentleman, a grandpa, that had a ring bell camera. Now, nobody said it was a fairy, but it looked pretty intriguing what got caught on the camera. So we did a show. But that's the beauty in it all, right? Asking these questions. And that's what I think allows for a great discussion, or even a book like yours. Like you said, you didn't try to decide what the answers were. You just you shared people's stories. You gave a voice to the stories of what people were open to sharing with you, right?
Yeah.
And so people can make their minds up.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing with that is that UFO cases in other countries always seem more interesting and exciting. So living in the UK, the Betty and Barney Hill cases and George Adamski and everything, they all seemed exciting and kind of believable. Whereas in my own country, you thought, well, nothing like that seems to happen. But you can actually go out and interview people, because wherever you live, people seem to see UFOs. So
you had the crop circles all the time. You were one of the first people. So did you talk to anybody that actually like maybe witnessed one, or why they were there? I'm just asking it off the top of my head because we live on different continents. I always say the best way to find out what's going on in someone's country is talk to people who actually live in the country.
I never really got into crop circles.
I still don't know what they are. I'm not saying they're real. I don't know what they are, but they were. And then they've kind of died off, haven't they? Just like you said, and you are right about fairy folk, you are. But same as crop circles. You don't hear about them the way you did back in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I think there's been one or two in the papers, but there's no specific interest. I think a lot of the interest died off when people were saying we're hoaxing them, but then some people said they were kind of hoaxing them, but controlled by alien forces. Yeah. So
yeah. You know what? I got to do my station ID. Hang on. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you, Kevin. I was looking at the time, but I was having such a good conversation with Nigel. I didn't want to interrupt. I was supposed to do it halfway through. Sorry, hang on one sec. So I'm gonna highlight you, Kevin. And the reason why I repeat the comments, I should have told you that before the show, Nigel, is because we've got so many people around the world listening, so they can't see the screen. So Kevin, or Z Sun Dragon, is adding, if you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Angel Rock. I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin, and you're listening to UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. You can hear us on 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and Mississippi, and 107.7 FM out of the beautiful city of New Orleans. And our amazing guest is Nigel Watson. We are talking about his book that he's written about personal accounts of UFOs. I got to pull it up here because I didn't memorize the title. I'm sorry, but it's so cool because Nigel interviewed a bunch of people with this book and shared their stories of what they felt they experienced. And the title will explain it all. Paranormal Perspectives, Portraits of Alien Encounters Revisited, and High Strangeness, British UFO Cases, written by Nigel Watson. And you guys, I'll tell you now, please don't go anywhere after this show, because we have the Light Gate coming up next with Preston Dennett and Dolly Saffron. And we're glad that you joined us live tonight. So thank you, Kevin, for doing that. I appreciate that. I think we have somebody, I think I got everybody on Instagram. I always like people to know that we see you, we hear you, because I hate when I go to a live show and it's not, the chat isn't like just flying, and then the host never sees your questions or asks or says hi. So I always try to do that when people are tuning in. So thank you for that. So you mentioned also about hybrids. Before I ask you about the hybrids, Julie Jean Bassett, I was already telling people about you, and I said if you were here, because we're talking all about, I mentioned our shared experience in 2 different countries in November with the full moon, and I was telling them about you being an animal communicator. Fantastic. She's helped me with my animals. Shamanic practitioner. She's incredible. You can look her up on juliejanebassett.com for the animal thingies. And for shamanic practitioner healing, believe me, well, she's amazing. She's been on the show quite a few times, and she's coming on, I think, before the end of the year. You can also get a hold of her on whitetail healing, shamanichealing.com for the shamanic stuff. Julia, I'm so sorry. I know you have a beginner animal communication course coming up in September. Feel free to post the dates. And I know you've got some chakra healing and stuff with animals too. Sorry about that. So yes, I did ask Kevin about the crop circles. Did you miss that part? I did ask, but you mentioned, Nigel, about hybrids. Did you run into people that had stories?
Hybrids, yes.
Yeah. Or claiming to be hybrids.
Oh, that's another element of ufology that's was kind of promoted by Bud Hopkins, and he felt that the mission of the aliens and the whole business of alien abduction was to create hybrid aliens that I suppose can live better on Earth. And he promoted several stories of women who'd were pregnant and then miscarried or had missing fetuses. Actually, Paula Green in my book mentions a similar instance that occurred to her. Actually kind of relates to the UFO subject. And perhaps I think it's a bit of a difficult area because there can be different reasons why people miscarry, and perhaps to get over the loss of a fetus, it's appropriate to then think, perhaps they're existing on another planet or on a spaceship or somewhere else. So I think in a way it can be something to comfort people with, and it is a sort of difficult area. Somebody like Bud Hopkins was keen on that, but I think it's a bit difficult area to really explore and to prove it as well. I think it's more down to human biology really, but it's a sort of psychological need to explain why that happened. And it's interesting though, like the contactees did mention aliens that look just like us and can blend in with society. That's another element of it, that hybrids might be living amongst us. And
what about Men in Black, though? I think I've seen something about Men in Black in here. Did people have stories with that?
Yeah. And the Men in Black are often they're either regarded as government agent types or spooks, or like humanoids that don't seem to act in a human manner. They don't know how to.
I've seen video long before deepfakes and AI. I have seen some video. Only, I think I've seen 2 videos caught on security cameras. I don't know what they were, but they weren't human, and they were in black suits, really tall. Have you seen those videos?
Yeah, there's only one case, I think, in my book where a sort of 3-foot high mini Men in Black. Man in Black is seen by Paul Bennett, and we just saw it briefly on a street near his home. But it was more like a black entity than a traditional man in black. But through my book, there are several accounts of sort of strange humanoid people seen, in everyday life by these people. And I think that's something that's sometimes forgotten about in UFO literature, that there's quite a lot of these stories of aliens living amongst us, really.
Do you mind if I read this? Because this is something about your book, and it's about Paul. It says, UFO witnesses and experiencers can also be plagued by a life-changing poltergeist or other ghostly experiences, telepathic messages, alien communications, strange coincidences, visions of the future, and abductions. One such case involved schoolboy Paul Bennett and his friends who in the 1970s near their homes in I think it's Rose, it's WROSE, Bradford. How do we say it, Nigel?
Rose.
Oh, so it is Rose. Okay, Rose, Bradford, and then it's followed by West Yorkshire. Often saw UFOs and had other ghostly experiences. In October 1975, they had a few UFO-related encounters at the nearby Idle Hill Reservoir. The first time they saw a glowing red cigar-shaped object directly over the reservoir, and a few days later, a glowing green object was seen hovering over the same location. More dramatically, because I forgot about this one. I'm so glad you brought him up. More dramatically, sandwiched between these incidents, Paul and friends saw a large green robot scooping up soil samples with its clawed arms. I'm just going to read just the last little bit. The remarkable thing about what he called the Rose Monster was that it hovered above the ground and had two very thin, stilt-like legs and two small plate-like feet. The head had no eyes, nose, mouth, or ears, or hair, but looked just like a thick, solid ball of green metal. Paul threw some stones at the thing, and only one of them hit. It made a ping sound as if it had hit metal. There was no retaliation from the robot, and a few minutes later, it disappeared from view. That story is insane. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
wow.
And also it sort of floats above the ground, but it's sort of like it's almost like a sort of vision, but the thing about the stone pinging on it seems to indicate something solid as well. So and also it's a robot that isn't like traditional robots. You know, it's got a big round belly and a round head with no features on it, and these weird claw-like arms that sort of just scoop soil samples up. But that's a bit like I was saying, though, a lot of cases up to about that period did involve sort of aliens or things that acted in a way we expect aliens would scientifically explore our planet. So in a way, you know, this was like an exploration robot, you know, taking soil samples, but then it's not like something, it's a kind of combination of vision and real, but you know, Paul had a lot of these sightings and experiences, but he was very intelligent, and he was what I would call quite down to earth as well. I think, you know, he was influenced a lot by the writings of John Keel, but I think he had, and he admitted he saw everything in a kind of UFO frame of mind, but he was, at least he had that, you know, that view of his own perspective on the subject, you know, so he wasn't completely down that rabbit hole, and he is very much into the idea that these are sort of interdimensional things, and that you can experience them on a different level from just normal reality. But yeah, he was quite an intriguing person. I think he was one of the first sort of high strangeness witnesses I really interviewed. I met him a few times, and you know, he wrote a lot about his experiences as well. So he was quite an interesting person to meet, and I think his accounts are very kind of quite detailed as well. They're not just vague fantasies, you know. But he saw that robot, and on another occasion he saw these sort of angel-like an angel-like figure in his bedroom with his brother and a friend. And it's funny because his friend and his brother wanted to run away from this vision, but Paul wanted to see more of it. And that kind of sums up his character, that he was curious and wanted to investigate, while his friends wanted to just get away from this, whatever it was, and so he had a kind of pioneering spirit, and it's very
He
much.
threw a rock at the robot. I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Like, what if the thing turned and went, not on my watch, and came after him? Like, he's brave. The thing with children, okay, so I help a lot of people with the paranormal too, and I have a questionnaire that I go through, and some of the first questions I ask people is, do you have small children and or animals? And if they say yes, I say, what are they experiencing? What are they telling you? And how are they acting? Because I really do believe in, and again, having another real area of field of interest. I have so many, but one of them I've studied for quite a few years is young children who I believe they can see spirit, like they can see whatever is there that we can't, because, and animals too, because there's just been far too many documented cases, or what you can see, or what, or you put poltergeist and UFOs all in the same sentence. So how does that happen? Like, did you find with the people you talked to that they both kind of had the same type of experiences once they had one or the other? Like, they saw a UFO or maybe had an abduction, and then they were having paranormal experiences.
Yeah, that seems to be the case, really.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I mentioned angels, and a lot of it seems to be related to the Bible and biblical type visions. We've spoken about like apocalyptic visions, and Norman Harrison in my book talks about the archangel Michael, and guardian angel type figures. And I think even Paul Bennett was influenced by the Book of Revelation. So there's that thread of like Christianity, but it's been recycled into a kind of secular view of the world, and perhaps the vacuum left by Christianity and belief in the religion has been filled by it being reinterpreted in UFO terminology. And also, like with Paul, I think there's just a few minor poltergeist things. I think a picture fell off a mantelpiece and different weird things like that. But at the time, Flying Saucer Review published a lot of reports about UFO cases that involve quite a lot of paranormal and poltergeist activity as well. But you don't seem to really hear so much about that because the focus has been on sort of UAPs and abductions previously. But that's the thing. There's so many little elements to the subject. So I think we always want to make patterns and try to make sense of it. Whereas, we were saying aliens also act like trickster figures. So perhaps they're just like messing with our minds as well. So
that's their entertainment. Let's go to Earth and mess with the humans. Well, we just have a little bit more time. The one thing I keep thinking, so you were mentioning angels and what have you. Have you ever seen this video? Now, this is from quite a few years ago, Chinese traffic cam. And it's a gentleman, it's 3 a.m. or somewhere around there, and he's pedaling with this little old man on a bicycle, and he's got a basket on the back of his bicycle, and there's a white van that is speeding along the highway. And this man's going to get hit. There's no way he's not going to get hit. All of a sudden, you see this flash and blur, and then the man's on the side of the road, And again, this is not from AI. This is from many years ago. And the man stops the van. He thinks he's hit the man on the bike. He's out. He's looking under his car. He's looking all over. The man on the side of the road, you can tell as best as you can from a traffic camera, like he's just stunned. Like, how am I still here? And how did I get here? And there's a being with a black hood on, and it's a hoodie with black jeans. Their hands are glowing. Like, you can see it. It's not color. They stick their hands in their pocket. They put their head down and they just slowly walk off the camera. Have you ever seen that video before?
No. That sounds
It's
quite...
mind blowing. Like, what is that? Was that an ET? Was it I don't think it was an angel. Was it? I don't know. But how did that happen?
Yeah, it sounds
Mhm.
rather like a demonic character, but it's actually
I would
acted in
say
a
good. It saved the
way.
guy's life.
Yeah, it acts in a good way, so it acts
Mhm.
in an unexpected fashion. And perhaps that's the thing with it. Aliens, they act in rather strange manner, or often their messages are often spoken in a sort of convoluted manner. So you can, or often they'll just say, ask questions like, what time are you in, and things like that,
Mhm.
over just odd philosophical questions that are there to confuse you rather than enlighten you. And I suppose that's like the essence of a UFO subject sometimes, that you get less enlightened rather than more enlightened. The more you look at the subject, the more you sort of discover different elements of it. And they just when you settle into one explanation, or you're happy
Yeah,
with one
it
explanation,
all changes.
yeah, exactly. And in a way, I suppose with my book, I want people to change their expectations about the subject and open their minds to different aspects of it, so that in future people will look out for these features that I mention. And perhaps over time we've also got a bit more refined. At the time I was writing, there wasn't so much talk about abductions and even close encounters of the third kind, meeting aliens. It wasn't that
Mhm.
big a thing. And a lot of it came in response to the publicity around Close Encounters of a Third Kind, the movie, and Star Wars as well. They both
Mhm.
came out sort of 77 and 78 in Britain. And I think there's all that interest in science fiction and UFOs that made those films sort of blockbusters, but they also had a lot generated tons of media publicity. So then people were willing to report their own experiences, and that's how a lot of the cases came to me, because of that media frenzy around Close
Well, we've
Encounters.
just given them, we're almost out of time. We've just given them a few amazing stories, you guys. You got to go out and buy Nigel's book, because I'm telling you, I just picked a few stories. There are so many. So, Nigel, where can people buy your book? Do you have anything coming up? If people want to talk more with you or get a hold of you, I know you've got a Facebook page, but if you can tell us all that stuff, where to get the book, how to get a hold of you, anything
Yeah,
like that, anything coming up.
yeah, you can get the book on Amazon and most online retailers. And I've got a Facebook page, so if you just look up Nigel Watson, a UFO or something like that, you'd probably get me on Facebook. But you
I
can
found
also
it pretty quick.
you can also you can contact me directly on nigelwatson1@gmail.com, and I'm
Okay.
happy to get any feedback really from readers, or if they've got their own experiences to talk about.
Well, I appreciate you so much coming on here, and maybe in the new, I'm booking into the new year already for the show, but maybe in the new year we can touch base, because I still, there's so many stories we didn't talk about, you guys, and every time I would mention something, people's faces were like, you could see their comments going, wow. So you guys, stay tuned, because Dolly Saffron and Preston Dennett are coming up next with the Light Gate. I want to thank Carnation for sponsoring all the shows on Mondays here on UPRN. We call it Carnation Mondays. So wherever you are in the world, I believe Carnation is a brand that's worldwide. If you wouldn't mind and you've got a brand that you like by Carnation, please don't hesitate to pick it up, because it helps support us here too, with Carnation sponsoring us. And we're very grateful for Carnation taking care of us here on UPRN. So like I said it 20 minutes ago. I should have said it almost an hour ago, but I was too deep into this conversation. You guys, you're listening to UFO Paranormal United Public Radio Network. I'm Lorilei Potvin, your host of the Angel Rock. Next week, we have, and my mind just went blank, Steve. Oh God, it's going to drive me nuts now. He's been on the Steve Burgess. He's from the UK too, but I think he's over in the US now. He is a hypnotherapist, and he's written a book about the experiences of a hypnotherapist, and he has got some incredible stories in this book. He's just released things with aliens, I believe, paranormal, the high strangeness again. So he'll be on next week on the Angel Rock, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you guys ever want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me on Facebook.com/The Angel Rock, or any social media platform. I do psychic and mediumship reading. I do energy healing. I do Akashic records. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm working on my first course, and yes, I am finally working on it. So that should be coming out hopefully sometime in the fall. So when I do, hopefully I'll go to a domain name so you guys we'll put it all in one spot. But like I said, social media is the best place. I have 2 groups on Facebook: Paranormal University for all things paranormal, the Angel Rocker Tribe for all things spiritual. I love y'all. I will see you with Carrie Lynn too, live on Thursday, 7 p.m. We still haven't really decided what we're going to do yet, but you guys know it's going to be fun. We always keep you guessing. Anyways, love you guys all. Thanks for always supporting us and being here. And we'll see you soon. Okay, have a good one. Thanks, Nigel, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.